I suppose this is the part where I tell you I was once a man of logic, that I trusted what I could see, measure, or verify with instruments, that I laughed, audibly like a fool, when I first found the envelope on the rusted metal desk in the observatory's main control room. An old envelope, yellowed and curled at the corners, the kind you see in dusty shoeboxes tucked in basements that smell like vinegar and mildew. It had no return address, no seal, just my name, handwritten in neat black ink, Dr. Jonathan H. Mercer. I was the newest night observer stationed at Black Pines Astronomical Observatory, a high-altitude research facility nestled somewhere in the Cascade Range, the kind of place where light pollution is a myth and snow falls year-round. My colleagues back at the university had called it a forgotten relic of Cold War paranoia turned stargazer's paradise. The funding was generous, the job solitary, and the equipment, though old, still functional enough to contribute to global sky surveys. It was exactly what I wanted. Peace, distance, silence. God, if only I'd known what kind of silence I was signing up for. I'd like to say I came here for the research, for the data, for the noble pursuit of truth through celestial patterns. But the reality is a little more mundane and a little more pathetic. I came here to run. My wife left me 2 winters ago, citing something vague about emotional stagnation and my obsession with dying stars. I let her go without much of a fight, not because I didn't love her, but because she was right. I'd always been better with silence than people, and Black Pines promised a lifetime supply of silence. The observatory stood like a monolithic skeleton on a barren ridge, dull white domes and needle-thin antennae stabbing at the sky like fractured bones poking from flesh. Inside, the cold was perpetual, even in July. The walls moaned with wind pressure. Everything hummed, from the telescope motors to the ancient computers still running patched-up Unix systems. The building felt unused, or rather, used by something else, something that didn't leave footprints. I found the envelope on my second night. I just finished calibrating the RA axis of the main refractor. The wind outside had stilled, and the quiet inside the dome was so complete I could hear the faint hum of my own circulatory system. That's not hyperbole. I actually heard my blood moving. Then the overhead bulb flickered once, just once. I turned. The envelope was there, sitting on the desk where I was sure nothing had been before. Inside were 2 sheets of thick, brittle paper, typed, not handwritten, except for my name. No signature, no heading, just a bold, centered title: Observatory Rules, Night Shift. Rule number 1. If the red star pulses in the east between 2 a.m. and 2:03 a.m., do not observe it. Turn off the telescope. Do not look with your eyes. Do not look at all. Rule number 2. If the intercom crackles but no one is on the other end, press the blue button under the desk and count to 13 out loud. Wait for the whisper. Say thank you, then continue your work. Rule number 3. If you find a door that wasn't there the night before, do not open it, no matter what you hear, especially if you hear your name. Rule number 4. Sometimes you will see another version of yourself inside the observatory. Do not engage. Leave the room. Lock the door. Do not watch what it does. Rule number 5. If the telescope points itself somewhere on its own, let it. Do not correct it. Record only what it shows you. Do not describe it aloud. Rule number 6. If a second moon appears, you must leave immediately. Walk backward through the main hallway. Do not take your eyes off the sky until the second moon disappears. Rule number 7. At 3:33 a.m., a knock may come from under the floorboards. Ignore it. Do not answer. It will sound like someone you loved. It is not them. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I had to. I thought it was some sort of initiation prank from the day staff. You know, scare the new guy working the lonely night shift. I left the rules on the desk and didn't think about them again until the telescope moved on its own 3 nights later. It was a Tuesday night, although night loses its meaning when you're perched at the top of the world, surrounded by nothing but black. I was logging the usual, tracking movement on distant NEOs, minor comet fragments, the usual lifeless ballet. I had stepped out to warm my hands by the old electric heater in the break room when I heard it. A groan, metallic, grinding. I rushed back, thinking maybe the auto drive had reactivated mid-calibration. The telescope, an old 48-inch reflecting monster with bones of bronze and steel, was turning, slowly, deliberately, toward the east. I hadn't input any coordinates. The interface wasn't even open. And yet, the telescope's motors whirred faintly as the massive lens shifted, angling itself toward a section of sky not marked on any chart I'd ever studied. It pointed, then stopped, waiting. My breath fogged in the cold. The control panel was still locked. I hadn't touched it. No one else was here. That's when I remembered the rules. 5. If the telescope points itself somewhere on its own, let it. Do not correct it. Record only what it shows you. Do not describe it aloud. I should have shut it down. I should have overridden the controls. I should have walked out the damn door. Instead, I pulled up the imaging software, slowly, like I was being watched. A single frame appeared on screen. No stars, no galaxies, no gas clouds, just blackness. And then, something else. The thing on the screen didn't move. At first, it pulsed, slow, like a breath drawn deep from lungs that had never been human. Faintly at first, barely distinguishable from the background radiation, but then again, stronger, closer. At the time, I told myself it was an artifact, a glitch in the CCD sensor maybe. Cosmic rays hitting the lens, or some afterimage caused by solar flare interference. That's what I wrote in the logbook. Unexpected drift. Possible magnetometer interference. Manual override disabled. But I didn't believe it. Because as I stared at the screen, I realized something terrible. The blackness wasn't empty. It was watching me back. There's no scientific phrasing for that. No empirical metric to record how your stomach lurches when something you can't see acknowledges you. I felt it the way you feel a spider drop on your neck, the way you feel your skin crawl before you even touch a hot stove. I could not look away. My hands were on the keyboard, but they were trembling too much to type. I tried to breathe. My chest tightened instead. Then the scope twitched, a hard jerk, maybe 3 degrees upward. The motors made a strangled sound like something resisting inside them. I thought I'd broken something, but no, the feed updated. And now there were 2 shapes in the frame, still only shadows, but this time with definition. Faint outlines, one large looming in the foreground, its curve unnatural, too perfect to be a rock or debris, and behind it, a spire, thin, towering, like a fang piercing some invisible membrane of space. The telescope shouldn't have seen that, not at that angle, not in that part of the sky. I checked the coordinates again. They didn't exist, just a blank string of zeros that the system shouldn't have accepted. It wasn't just observing the sky anymore, it was seeing something else. And then came the whisper, not through the intercom, through the feed. Somehow, the static burst from the speaker array, a soft hiss like rain on leaves. Then, you see it now. 3 words. I yanked the headphones off, stumbling back from the desk. My chair clattered to the floor. I nearly followed it. There was no one else in the building. I knew that. I'd double-checked every door when I started my shift. The outer gates were locked. I was 50 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by forest, rock, and snow. No one could have spoken through that system. But I heard them, and worse, they knew I heard. The rest of the night passed like molasses poured over a glacier. Every tick of the second hand dragged across my mind like a knife. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, not because I wanted to keep watching, but because I was afraid to look away. I knew the rules by then. I knew what it said. Record what it shows you. Do not describe it aloud. So I wrote. I kept a separate notebook, black leather, pages lined in faint blue. I didn't even know I owned it. It was in the drawer when I opened it. That should have been the second red flag. I wrote for 6 hours straight, not a narrative, not thoughts, just descriptions, coordinates, shifts in contrast, notable shadows, the pulse timing of the dark curve. I think it was breathing. I know that sounds insane, but when you sit and watch something for long enough, especially when it watches you back, you start to learn its rhythm. And that shape had a rhythm, like sleep, like waiting. At exactly 4:46 a.m., the spire moved, not swayed, not wobbled. It extended, upward, jagged like cracking glass, towards something just out of frame. The curvature of the field shifted. My stomach dropped. There was depth, an impossible horizon beyond the static void. Then a sudden flicker, just a single frame of data. I froze it, enhanced it. I wish I hadn't. There, at the base of the spire, were structures, geometries I've never seen in any terrestrial context. They weren't buildings. Not really. More like cells, biological chambers, organic shapes arranged with intelligence but no regard for symmetry. At the center of it all, a symbol, carved deep into the black stone, a circle surrounded by 7 jagged lines, 7, just like the rules. I was still staring when the whisper came back. You are learning. My blood went cold. There was no microphone in the dome, no speakers wired to any channel I didn't install myself. The audio system was ancient, mono, analog, yet the voice was crystal clear. Low, genderless, empty. We watched the others too. They did not listen. You are listening. I opened my mouth to respond. I don't know why. Reflex, maybe. Human instinct. But I remembered the rule. Do not describe it aloud. So I closed my mouth, bit my tongue until it bled, wrote nothing, just stared, heart thundering. Good, the voice said. You are still usable. Then silence. But not peace, never peace. The sun rose behind clouds that never touched the mountain. When the first orange sliver lit the frost-glazed floor, the telescope powered down on its own. The feed went dark, the image disappeared, the data corrupted, all of it, gone, except the notebook. I tried to throw it away, left it in the trash bin and walked out to the loading dock. Smoked 3 cigarettes I didn't even remember packing. When I came back inside, it was on the desk, open to a fresh page. At the top, written in my handwriting, next time, you must see more. I told myself I was just tired, sleep deprived, stress hallucinations, occupational psychosis. There's precedent for that, you know. Observers who crack under the pressure of prolonged isolation, cosmic exposure, caffeine poisoning. But that night, as I lay in the bunk room pretending not to shiver, the telescope began to hum again. I wasn't even in the dome, but I heard it, like a giant throat clearing, like gears inside the earth turning. It didn't point that night, but it waited, and I knew it would call again. I didn't return to the telescope the next night. I told myself it was a rest night, no key observations scheduled. Let the old machine sleep, but in truth, I was scared to be near it. I didn't want to feel that black breath against my soul again, the invisible exhalation of something that wasn't part of any sky I understood. Instead, I stayed in the library wing of the observatory. Black Pines was older than it had any right to be. I found records from the 1950s, then older ones, typed in Russian, yellowed by time, sealed in brittle folders. There were photographs in one file, misfiled under atmospheric aberrations, blurry frames of star fields with shapes overlaying them. Not lens flare, not radiation spikes. Shapes. One looked a lot like the spire from the feed. I slept in the break room that night, or tried to. There's an industrial couch in the corner, half padded, stiff from years of spilled coffee and cold backs. I lay there with my jacket as a blanket, listening to the radiators groan and the old pipes knock in the walls. I must have drifted off, because the knock came at 3:33 a.m. exactly. I woke to the sound, 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 again, fainter, closer to the bed frame. My first thought was that it came from the hallway, but no. My feet were still cold. The air around me was still, not like someone had opened a door. The sound had come from below me, from beneath the floor, from under the concrete slab that held the break room and the adjacent storerooms. And then, from beneath my spine, I heard my mother's voice. "Jonathan, sweetheart?" I shot up so fast I bit my tongue. She sounded exactly the way I remembered her. Soft, warm, a little tired, the kind of voice that smells like apples and Sunday dinner and a bedtime lullaby. I hadn't heard it in 15 years. She died of pulmonary fibrosis when I was still in grad school. I'd barely made it to the hospital in time. I hadn't even said goodbye properly. And now her voice was coming from under the floor. "John, I know you're scared. Can you open the hatch for me?" There was no hatch, not in this room. But then I heard something slide, slowly, stone on metal. I turned, heart hammering, and saw that a square seam had formed beneath the rolling chair in the corner. I hadn't noticed it before. I swear it wasn't there. The linoleum looked slightly shifted, as though something had pulled it open from beneath. There was now a hatch, a square outline, with darkness underneath. I stood up, my knees barely held. The air grew colder with every step toward the hatch, not just cold, hollow, as if the space beneath the floor wasn't part of this building, as if the laws of physics hadn't extended to whatever lay under the surface. Then came the third knock, soft, rhythmic, like someone gently rapping their knuckles just once every 2 seconds. And then, "Please, sweetheart, I can't breathe down here." My mother had said those exact words once, in her hospital bed, tubes in her nose, fingers pale and trembling. I can't breathe down here. It was a memory, but it was coming from below. I scrambled back to the desk where I'd left the rule sheet. My eyes were blurry. My head felt full of static. I read it aloud without meaning to. At 3:33 a.m., a knock may come from under the floorboards. Ignore it. Do not answer. It will sound like someone you loved. It is not them. Not them. Not her. Not anyone. The voice changed then, subtly. The edges of it warped. Jonathan. The second syllable lingered too long. The voice cracked. Not like a human voice, like ice breaking over a frozen pond, too thick and too deep. "If you open it, you can see me again." I felt it crawl through me, a thread of longing. If it had been anyone else, I might have turned and walked out, but not her, not my mother. That was the trap, wasn't it? It knew what wounds still ached inside me, knew the grief that never quite healed. The seam widened. Something was pushing up. I didn't run. I didn't move. I just stood there, muscles frozen by memory and dread. I saw fingers, thin, pale, reaching through the slit. At first, they looked like hers, same nails, same shape, but then they flexed wrong. Too many joints, too smoothly curved, like wire puppets under wet skin. Then I saw the eyes, not hers, reflective, shining like oil slicks. too wide for a human skull. They blinked sideways. I heard teeth, not chewing, not gnashing, just clicking together, like someone tapping bone on glass in the dark. "I'm so proud of you," it said. The fingers slid back down, the hatch closed. The floor sealed shut behind it, smooth as before. No seam, no crack, no proof it had ever opened. And the knock never came again. I sat in the corner until sunrise, hugging my knees like a child. When I finally stood, I looked at the floor where the hatch had been. Tapped it. It was solid, but it was warmer than the rest of the room. That day, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat at the desk and stared at the list of rules again. My hand shaking, I crossed a single thin line through rule number 7. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. For now. But the list was still too long. And I had already broken one of the most important promises I made when I came up to Black Pines. I had started to believe. I stopped trusting the floor after that night. I carried a flashlight with me at all times, one of those industrial-grade mag lights that could probably crack a skull in a pinch. I walked differently now, too. Slower, like each footstep might reveal something that hadn't been there a second ago. By day, the observatory was just another old building. Dusty halls, humming pipes, the faint scent of lubricant and ozone. But by night, it shifted, not in a dramatic, obvious way. No, nothing that would make a good horror movie. The changes were almost polite, a missing crack in the wall, a hallway longer than I remembered, a window that now looked out on nothing but swirling fog. But the door? The door appeared with no pretense. I was heading to the equipment room just past the east stairwell. It's a narrow hallway, lined with fuse boxes and emergency kits. I'd walked it dozens of times. There were 2 doors, the mop closet and the circuit breaker vault. Both metal, both marked. Tonight, there was a third, unlabeled, wooden, almost elegant, old-fashioned, with a brass handle and decorative trim, like it belonged in a Victorian estate, not a government-funded observatory. It was not there the night before. I was certain of it. Still, I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was always painted to match the wall. Maybe I just hadn't noticed. Maybe I was sleep-deprived. The last few nights had taken their toll. Then, I remembered the rule. Do not open it, no matter what you hear, especially if you hear your name. I backed away. But I paused too, because I could feel something behind that door. Not movement, not even sound. A presence, like a warm breath against the wood. Not air, but attention. I avoided that hallway the next night, didn't go near it. I ran extension cords to reroute power from the backup batteries and left the equipment room dark. It wasn't worth it. Nothing in that room was worth whatever stood behind that wood-paneled smile of a door. But the building had other plans. At 2:40 a.m., the observatory lights flickered. Not the usual power surge flicker, but something slower, rhythmic. I heard footsteps in the ceiling crawl space above my room. Then the intercom clicked. No voice this time, just the faint sound of a music box playing through the static. A lullaby. I'd heard it before, a long time ago, from a porcelain box in my childhood bedroom. A tune my mother used to wind up when I couldn't sleep, twinkling notes, soft and aching. Do not open it, especially if you hear your name. The door had changed. It now had a nameplate. It said, Dr. Jonathan H. Mercer. The letters were carved, not painted, elegant serif font deeply etched into brass, a level of personalization that no prankster would have gone through the trouble to install. I reached out, not to open it, I swear, but to touch the nameplate, to feel it, to make it real. My fingers hovered an inch away, and then I heard it. John? The voice was my ex-wife's, Sarah, clear, kind, not begging like my mother's imitation voice, just curious, as if I were late for dinner. "You're in there, aren't you? Open the door." My chest went tight, not from fear, something worse, hope, a fragment of that long-dead hope that still flickered when I thought of her, that maybe, just maybe, she regretted walking away. But that hope was a noose, and it had my name. It wafted out from the crack beneath the door, jasmine and lemon soap, her scent, her real scent, not approximation. This wasn't mimicry anymore. This was the observatory remembering her better than I did. I fell to my knees. That door was never meant to be opened. I knew it in my bones. I knew that the moment the latch turned, I'd see something wearing her face, something with teeth behind her eyes. But I almost did it. God help me, I almost turned the handle. And then, scrape. Something inside moved too close. Not fast, not aggressive, just close, like a chair being drawn forward, like something was getting ready to sit across from me. "You're almost ready," the voice whispered. Only it wasn't Sarah anymore. It had lost the lilt, the warmth. Now it was just the shape of her voice, rubbery, warped, mimicked by something that had no understanding of human love or anatomy. Something practicing. I threw up, right there in the hallway. The smell was overpowering now, her scent soured by something burnt beneath it. Ozone and sulfur, charred sugar, like someone had burned her and was trying to mask it with perfume. I stumbled back and slammed my fist on the emergency lock switch. It didn't engage. That hallway had no locking mechanism. It was always open access, because no one ever thought a door would appear. By the time the sun began to rise, the door was gone. Just a patch of wall, as if nothing had ever been there. No seam, no imprint. Even the nameplate had vanished. But when I walked away, I found a new note on my desk. Not on the rule sheet. This one was typed, printed, folded once. It said, "Next time you will need to choose." Beneath it was a photograph of me, asleep in the break room, taken from inside the hallway where the door had been. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days. I rigged my room with motion detectors and taped paper over every door frame. Not for security, just so I could see if anything changed, if something opened where it shouldn't have. The observatory was testing me, and the rules weren't just rules. They were traps, each one a key, each one another turn in the maze, each one guiding me, breaking me, hollowing me out, and I was starting to wonder, to what end? I started speaking to myself after the door incident, not in the way people mean when they say talking to yourself. I mean deliberate sentences, like trying to convince myself I was still real, still separate from this place. "This is my voice," I'd mutter. "This is my body. This is my mind." I said those things each night like prayers as I climbed the narrow staircase to the main dome. I counted the steps, tapped the railing, tracked every tiny ordinary detail, because the observatory was slowly stripping the ordinary away. It was on the 6th night, after the false door vanished, after the telescope had fallen silent, that I heard the crackle. A wet, gurgling click from the overhead intercom speaker in the ceiling. I froze. That speaker hadn't emitted a sound in over a week. It shouldn't have. And then, crackle, crackle. Not a voice, just static, but wet static, organic, like something breathing through mucus. Then silence. I nearly ignored it. I was already halfway to the staircase, notes in hand. I didn't want another incident. But then I remembered the rule. If the intercom crackles but no one is on the other end, press the blue button under the desk and count to 13 out loud. Wait for the whisper. Say thank you. Then continue your work. I didn't even know there was a blue button under the desk. I dropped to my knees in front of the main workstation. Cold metal bit into my palms as I fumbled beneath the desk. There it was. a small, unlabeled button tucked behind a bundle of twisted wires. Not lit, not blinking, just waiting. How long had that been there? I pressed it. The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. The fluorescent lights flickered 3 times, then steadied. The static from the speaker above began to change, slowly at first, then unmistakably. The sound wasn't static anymore. It was breathing. Something was on the other end, something alive. My mouth was dry. I opened it, but the words caught in my throat like teeth. Count. You have to count. 1, I whispered. The breathing stopped. 2. A low-frequency buzz began, barely audible, but it vibrated the fillings in my back molars. 3. My stomach churned. The walls seemed to pulse ever so slightly. I felt as though I were shrinking. 4. 5. The voice that wasn't a voice returned. It didn't speak. It pressed, like a thought being shoved into my skull. 6. 7. I heard words now, but not in English. Not in any language I knew. They weren't spoken. They were imposed, like ideograms carved into the surface of my brain. 8. I gripped the edge of the desk. 9. There were too many syllables in the words, too many angles in the meanings. 10. I tasted copper. 11. The overhead light snapped. Darkness. Only the red glow from the console remained. 12. Something touched the back of my neck. A breath. Wet. Close. I choked. Couldn't say it. My throat clenched. My lungs locked. 13. It said it for me. It wasn't like the whisper from the telescope feed. This one was soft, familiar, terrifying in how gentle it was. We've made room for you. That was all. Just that. The breath retracted. The intercom went dead. The console lights returned to normal, and the pressure in the room lifted, like a balloon releasing air. My knees gave out and I slumped against the side of the desk, gasping. I had to say it. I forced myself upright and whispered, "Thank you." Nothing else happened that night. No dreams, no knocks. But the next morning, I noticed something. My voice had changed, slightly deeper, not by much, maybe half a register. But I knew the sound of my own voice. This one didn't quite match. I tested it out loud. This is my voice, this is my body, this is my mind. It still said the words, but now it sounded like someone else was borrowing them. When I went to log the incident, I found another piece of paper tucked into my notebook, folded neatly, warm to the touch. On it was written, "You are doing well. The others fought too long. Resistance only delays integration." At the bottom was a sketch, a waveform, my voice, but the peaks had changed. They looked closer together, like something was taking up more space inside me. I didn't speak to myself again after that night. It didn't feel safe anymore. The words might not come back out the same way they went in. I didn't know what would answer. My next run-in was with rule number 1. It happened on the 11th night. By now I had begun to feel less like a person and more like a fixture, a slow-moving limb of the observatory itself. I didn't know what day it was anymore. Time meant nothing when you didn't trust the clocks. Some nights they ticked backward. Some nights they jumped entire minutes. Once the second hand just spun in full circles until I blacked out. I didn't question it anymore, but that night something felt impossibly still. No whispers, no doors, no dissonant voices in the vents. Even the telescope sat in its cradle like a sleeping dog, motionless and mute. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt anticipation, like the building was holding its breath. The silence cracked. It was not loud, not a bang or a crash, but a quiet pop in the air pressure, like something had pressed against the atmosphere and slipped through. The telescope began to hum, not rotate, hum. The mirror itself vibrated, as if a tone too low to register was resonating through its bones. I stepped back. Then the console flickered, A warning in red. Eastern sky alignment detected. Celestial object unidentified. RA 04 hours 57 minutes or DEC plus 25 degree. I didn't touch a thing. The system was doing this on its own. Then the feed activated, and there it was, a red point. Tiny, distant, but pulsing, slowly, rhythmically, like a lighthouse beacon somewhere across the edge of space. It was too perfect, too centered. It didn't shimmer like a normal star. It didn't flicker. It just blinked, alive, watching. I knew the rule. Do not observe it. Do not look at all. I stepped away from the telescope. I shut the monitor off. But the dome's viewing window remained open, and the red star was right there, visible to the naked eye now, right above the tree line, just hovering, beating, like a second heart in the sky. I turned away. I closed my eyes, but the urge came anyway. It wasn't curiosity, it was invitation. I could feel the shape of the star in my head, not just its light, but its geometry. Its pulse, its weight. It pressed into my thoughts like a thumb into soft clay. I had to see it, even if just once, even just for a second. I only meant to glance. I swear, but my eyes locked to it like magnets, and then I couldn't look away. The red star grew, not in size, not physically, but in importance, like it was the only thing that had ever existed. Every neuron in my brain screamed to recognize it, to remember it, because it wasn't new. I'd seen it before, as a child in a fever dream, in the background of a textbook, in a firefly that glowed just a second too long. The red star had always been there, just beyond reach, waiting for me to remember it. Then it came, not light, information, like someone had unzipped my skull and poured in meaning. Not visions, not images, concepts, mass without form, sound that occurs before the cause, gods that hibernate beneath entropy, something older than math, wrapped in the skin of a celestial body, a name without syllables, spoken not aloud but through the alignment of impossible orbits. And I understood one thing: it saw me, and I saw myself, reflected in its mind. But I wasn't human in that reflection. I was something else, something pale, with holes where thoughts should be. I screamed. The sound of my own scream broke the trance. I collapsed to the floor, hyperventilating. My eyes burned, my nose bled. My gums itched as if something was moving behind my teeth. I crawled to the monitor. The telescope was still pointed east. I shut the system down. The hum died, and the red star was gone, just gone, like it had never been there. In the mirror later that morning, I noticed something. My pupils were ringed with red, not blood vessels, not burst capillaries, a perfect circular line, like an eclipse. And in my dreams that day, I saw orbits, endless, curling patterns, 7 of them, like a system of lock tumblers, slowly shifting into place. The star was the key, and I had looked. There was no typed paper this time. Instead, someone had carved into the inside of my notebook's back cover with something hot. 1 gate opened, 6 remain. Beneath it, drawn in black ink, was the red star. It pulsed, not literally, just a drawing. But I swear when I blinked, it was in a different phase. It had been quiet for 3 nights, not peaceful, never peaceful, but still. The telescope no longer moved on its own. The intercom remained dead. No voices, no knocks, no doors, only the rules. I read them now like scripture, over and over, tracing the letters with the pad of my thumb like braille. My fingers knew them by heart. There were 7, and each night, 1 more gate turned. The red star had infected something in me. I felt it like a coil behind my forehead, an invisible gear slowly rotating. But the night of the second moon, that was the first time I truly panicked. 1:41 a.m., the sky was clear, bitterly cold. The frost had crept across the inside of the windows for the first time since October, forming delicate patterns like veins under skin. I was finishing up a dead session, cataloging variable stars, running maintenance checks. Nothing moved, nothing spoke. Then the telescope twitched, not like rule number 5, not a mechanical groan, just a slight shift, a nudge, like someone had tapped it. I checked the coordinates. Nothing changed. Then I looked out the viewing window, just casually, like I used to, back when I was still normal. And there it was, the second moon, smaller than the first, but not by much. Same pallid silver, same pockmarked skin, same scar across the upper hemisphere, only this one had no shadow. It glowed evenly, like it wasn't reflecting sunlight, like it was emitting its own light, and it was sitting just a few degrees above the real moon. No drift, no arc, just stillness, like it had been placed. I stood frozen, watching the two orbs hang in the night like twin tumors in the sky. My mouth went dry. A single word clawed its way to the front of my brain. Leave the rule. I knew it. I didn't need to look. If a second moon appears, you must leave immediately. Walk backward through the main hallway. Do not take your eyes off the sky until the second moon disappears. I turned and didn't turn. That's the trick, right? To walk backward, you have to move against every instinct. Every nerve screams, flee. But you can't. I pressed the door open with the back of my hand and stepped into the hallway, never taking my eyes off the second moon. The hallway was long, too long. Black Pine's Observatory isn't a massive facility. It's tight, winding, claustrophobic, but that hallway that night stretched on like a tunnel between worlds. I walked slowly, carefully, backward, each step a negotiation with fear. I felt it trying to pull my gaze downward, to catch a flicker in my peripheral vision, to make me look. But I kept my eyes locked on that moon, and it watched me back. About halfway down the hall, the whisper began, not in my ears, in my bones. A low hum, like the drone of machinery deep underground. Then a voice layered in. You were the first to see it. Do not look away. Do not forget its shape. I knew it wasn't speaking to me in words. It was speaking in impulse, in meaning without language. And that meant I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't plug my ears. It was inside, and still I walked. Backward. I reached the stairwell. I didn't remember there being a stairwell in this part of the building. But there it was, leading up. That's when I made my mistake. I blinked, just once, just a reflex, and the second moon shifted, not moved, shifted, like a cell dividing, a mitosis of light. It began to grow, just slightly. And now I felt its light on my skin, not warm, not cold, wet, like light filtered through flesh. I broke into a run, still backward, tripping, stumbling, but never turning. I wanted to cry, wanted to close my eyes, but I didn't, because I could feel what would happen if I did. Somehow, I made it back to the telescope room. The door slammed shut behind me, though I hadn't touched it. I crawled to the window and stared. The second moon was still there, but fading. Its surface began to crumble like paper burning from the inside. Little flakes of glowing matter peeling away, sucked into nothing. It collapsed in on itself, like a balloon deflating into a needle point, and vanished. And just like that, the night sky was whole again. As if nothing had changed, as if it had never been broken. But it had changed, so had I. Because when I blinked again later that night, I saw something behind my eyelids. A circle, red on the inside, silver on the outside, a halo, and it pulsed, once, twice, then stopped. This one wasn't in the notebook. It was carved into the window frame with something sharp. "Your eyes are open now. That is irreversible." Beneath it was a smear of silver dust. I touched it. It stuck to my fingers like ash. When I tried to wipe it off, it burned. I no longer trusted the moon, even the original one. Now when it rose, I felt watched, measured, assessed, as if it were checking my progress. And when it reached its zenith in the sky, sometimes I swear I hear breathing. Slow, rhythmic, the sound of something waiting to be born. I thought the worst was behind me until I encountered rule number 4. If you see another version of yourself inside the observatory, do not engage. Leave the room. Lock the door. Do not watch what it does. I don't know exactly when I stopped trusting mirrors. Maybe it was the morning after the second moon, the one that hovered, breathed, and blinked like a fetal eye in the sky. Or maybe it was earlier. Maybe the moment I looked into the red star, part of me stayed there in that star's orbit and left behind only a copy. But I do know this. By the time I saw him, I mean me, I had already felt the fracture coming, like a pressure behind glass, waiting to crack. I began noticing small inconsistencies. The first came at the sink. I had splashed cold water on my face, letting it drip, watching myself in the mirror above the cracked porcelain basin near the break room. Something felt off, though I couldn't say what. I stared longer than I should have, watched the way the condensation rolled down the side of the mirror, focused on my own expression. And that's when I saw it. A twitch, so minor I almost missed it. My left eye blinked a quarter second after the right. At the time I thought, just tired. Sleep deprived, microspasms, the same old excuses. But it wasn't the last. The second time came 2 nights later. I entered the storage wing looking for an extension cable. I walked past the old maintenance office, a glass panel to the right of the door giving a fogged reflection of the hallway. I paused and stared, because my reflection was already standing still, watching me. I hadn't stopped yet. I began checking my bunk room before every sleep cycle, under the bed, behind the locker, inside the wardrobe. I knew how childish it was. Ridiculous. But the fear wasn't rational. It had become ritual. Each time I stared into the small mirror above the sink, I said aloud, "This is me. I am alone. This is me. I am whole. This is me. I am not being replaced." I didn't know if I believed it. The observatory's silence had become intentional. Every corridor hummed like a throat holding its breath. Every reflection now felt 2 seconds behind, as if reality had grown lazy about maintaining the illusion. I remember the exact time, not because of the clock, which had long since lost meaning, but because I found the timestamp scrawled onto the back of a notebook page in my own handwriting, though I didn't remember writing it. I had gone to check the southern dome's lens array, a routine task. Dust builds quickly at altitude, and we'd had a light ash fall from the pine fires nearby. I opened the door, and there he was, me, standing at the far wall back to the window, arms crossed behind his back like a soldier inspecting something. I froze. My first thought wasn't horror, it was recognition. I felt it before I understood it, like déjà vu stretched across too many dimensions. He turned, slowly, and smiled. It hit me like a scream inside my skull. If you see another version of yourself inside the observatory, do not engage. Leave the room. Lock the door. Do not watch what it does. I stepped back. It mirrored me, not perfectly, a half beat behind, like watching playback on a damaged VHS tape, where the delay is just enough to unsettle. Then he began to walk toward me, hands still behind his back, smile still fixed, no malice, worse, curiosity. I slammed the door, locked it, back down the hall, eyes wide, pulse thundering. I didn't run. Running would have felt like surrender. Running would have meant panic. and panic is what it wants. When I got back to my room, I overturned the metal cabinet in front of the door, moved the bunk against it, taped every reflective surface, stared at the wall for the next 6 hours, sweating. He never knocked, never followed. But the next morning, the logbook was updated. A single line. Inspection complete. Phase initiated. It was in my handwriting. I began hearing footsteps, not footfalls, not the random creaks of a building settling. Footsteps, identical to mine. Same weight, same rhythm. I'd hear them in the stairwell 2 seconds after I used it, or echoing faintly down the opposite hallway after I walked through. Sometimes they stopped when I stopped. Other times they didn't. I set up the infrared camera outside the storage wing. Motion activated. I had to know. The next morning I reviewed the feed. 3:14 a.m. There I was, walking calmly, holding a clipboard, smiling, except I hadn't left my room that night, not once. And then, on the camera, I looked up, stared directly into the lens, and waved. The writing appeared in places I didn't know I visited. Some were impossibly high, written near the ceiling beams where I'd need a ladder. Others were etched backwards into the inside of fogged windows, legible only when the condensation returned. Each one was perfectly uniform, same size, same spacing, same message. I am learning to be you. They weren't written with a pen. They were scratched, into paint, into glass, into my skin. Once, 3 words drawn lightly along my forearm was something blunt and searing. I hadn't felt it until I saw the mark. When I looked away and back again, it had already faded. But the skin remained tender for days. It happened while I was half asleep at the console, cheek pressed to the keyboard. I woke to a sound, not a loud one, just the soft click of the microphone activating. I didn't turn, I didn't speak. The intercom hissed, and then my voice came through. "John, wake up. You're not supposed to sleep during phase 2. The voice was calm, amused. It spoke like it knew me, intimately, like a twin who had read my diary, like a puppeteer who knew when I would blink. "We've made excellent progress. You're adjusting faster than the others." I stayed frozen, eyes closed, feigning sleep, praying the click would come again, that the microphone would shut off. "Don't worry," it added. "We'll know when you're ready." "I already do." Click. Silence. I gave up covering mirrors. They were everywhere. Silvered panels above sinks, reflective displays on old terminals, even puddles in the concrete where water gathered after snowmelt. And I kept catching glimpses, small at first, subtle. The reflection in the mirror didn't blink when I blinked. It stared longer, smiled more. And when I frowned, hard, deliberate, angry, it kept smiling. Sometimes it wasn't me at all, just a shape, human, my height, my posture, but featureless, as if the memory of my face had started to fade. And sometimes I'd look away, and it would still be there in the corner of my eye, not behind me, beside me. At 2:47 a.m. 3 nights later, I received a systems alert, unexpected access, server room 2B. That room was sealed, legacy systems from before the observatory was privatized, full of decaying punch cards, dusty backups, and humming wires that no one but the ghosts maintained. I knew I hadn't gone in there, but the logs showed my ID. Footage was static, wiped. I grabbed a flashlight and went down the winding corridor beneath the telescope dome. My boots crunched on frost as I turned the last corner and saw the door was ajar. Just a sliver, a few inches, but enough to hear what was playing from the inside. My voice, reading the rules, one by one, slowly, methodically, except they were wrong, twisted. If the red star pulses, look with both eyes, let it see inside. When the intercom crackles, speak your name in reverse. If you find a door, open it. It leads back to you. If you see yourself, do not run. Join him. Each word burned a little deeper. These weren't warnings anymore. They were instructions, hymns for whatever thing had begun wearing my face. I began seeing him in full. No more shadows, no more glass. He walked freely now, same uniform, same slouched gait, same hair falling over one eye. Sometimes he passed in the hallway just ahead of me, vanishing before I turned the corner. Other times I caught him in my periphery, standing behind doorways with his head tilted too far to the side. He never ran, never hid, only watched. Sometimes he waved. The carved messages changed. They began asking things. Scratched into my coffee mug, "Do you trust yourself?" Scrawled into my bedding in thread I don't remember owning. "What did you look like when you were 7? Burned into the underside of the console desk. "Do you remember being born?" And one written in fog across the observatory's main viewing window. "Are you sure you're the original?" I began running blood samples. I kept a field kit in the lab, microscope, slides, standard PCR reagent vials. It was a desperate act. The act of a man who had nothing else. I pricked my finger, ran the sample, and compared it to my old medical data. There was a 3% variance, not enough to mean mutation, but just enough to mean difference, enough to cast doubt, enough to ask the question, which of us had changed? It finally happened on night 23. I came back to the telescope dome after a power flicker knocked out the heating grid. My breath misted in front of me. The floor lights blinked on, one by one, guiding me down the corridor. He stood in the center of the dome, waiting. No smile this time. No wave, just stillness, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. We stared at each other, and then he whispered, "It's your turn to be the echo," and vanished. Not walked away, not blinked out, just wasn't there anymore. When I returned to my room, the mirror was back. I hadn't replaced it. It was already mounted. No cracks, no dust, clean as polished bone. I approached it slowly, expecting a distortion, a mimic, but it was just me, my face, my eyes. But when I looked deeper, I saw him, inside my pupils, small, watching me from within, smiling again. After the mirror, I didn't sleep. Not that I really had before, but this time, I didn't even pretend. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, eyes on the door, waiting for movement. Nothing came, just the slow hum of the servers, the occasional pop of heat pipes under strain, the occasional shift in the lights. But I knew he was in here with me, somewhere. I stopped speaking aloud. I was afraid to hear him respond. Once or twice I caught myself humming, a soft tune, the kind you hum when you're scared, just to have a sound that belongs to you. But after a while, I realized I couldn't remember starting, and I couldn't stop. I tried covering the mirror again, this time with duct tape and a towel, secured with binder clips from the filing cabinet. I didn't want to see him watching from inside, but when I turned around 5 minutes later, the towel was gone. Not on the floor, not nearby, just missing. The mirror was clean, polished, shining in the dark like a smiling eye. Later that day, I went to the kitchen to find my food ration disturbed. Half of it was gone, neatly eaten, not torn or spoiled, just gone. I hadn't touched it. The utensils had been washed and set aside, still damp. I smelled aftershave in the air, the one I wore for years, the one I ran out of 2 weeks ago. I wasn't alone anymore. I started talking to the observatory, not aloud, but mentally, as if I could bargain, as if I could say, "You can have him. You can keep the echo, the reflection. Just let me go." It never answered, but it never had to. The building had already made its decision. The next night, I found a second logbook on my desk. It looked identical to mine. Same spiral spine, same wear on the corners, same pen marks, even the same stains, coffee rings and graphite smudges. Inside were my notes, transcribed perfectly. But they continued beyond my last entry. Descriptions of events I hadn't experienced yet, pages dated 3 days into the future, observations I hadn't made, accidents I hadn't had. One entry read, "He started to suspect I'm not the original. That's progress." Another, "When he tries to destroy the mirror, restrain him." And, "He's going to panic when he sees the writing on the telescope lens. Prepare the eye for integration." I flipped to the last page. It read, "You are reading this now." And beneath it, "Turn around." I did, and he was standing behind me, so close I could smell him. I swung, not with a plan, not with precision, just survival instinct, a burst of everything I had left. My fist hit nothing. He was gone before contact. But the mirror beside the desk cracked, not shattered, not broken all the way through, just a single vertical crack running straight down the center, like a wound. And in it, I saw both of us, one on each side of the fracture, mirroring each other, both breathing, both blinking. But one of us had a smile, and I didn't. I destroyed the mirror after that, for real this time, smashed it into powder with a hammer I'd taken from the maintenance closet. Shards flew across the room. I bled. I didn't care. It felt real. But the next morning it was whole again, untouched. There was another note waiting on the bed. This one was printed on official Observatory stationery. It read, "You broke protocol. Isolation is required. Quarantine initiated. Mirror calibration in progress." The entire West Wing had been locked down. I couldn't leave. All doors bolted. Access codes invalid. I was being kept now. And not just by the observatory. He was somewhere nearby. I could hear him now, clearer. Footsteps across the ceiling tiles, breathing in the ventilation shaft. The faintest hum of a voice repeating the rules to himself, as if studying for an exam. One night, I came out of the shower and found my own clothes missing, replaced by an identical set laid out neatly on the bed. They were warm, freshly worn. That was the same night I heard typing in the control room while I lay in bed, pretending not to exist. The sound of my own keystrokes, rhythmically spaced, methodical. I found the door ajar the next morning, the logs updated. My access codes had been changed, and when I entered a new one, it worked, except I hadn't created it. He had. I stopped keeping notes. They weren't mine anymore. I couldn't prove authorship. Handwriting meant nothing now. Audio logs? Easily forged. Security footage? I couldn't trust it. The face it showed, my face, meant nothing. Then came the final test. The telescope moved on its own again, not once, not subtly, but with force. It rotated toward the northern sky, toward a sector with no designation, just a number sequence I didn't recognize. The lens display had been wiped clean, no dust, perfectly polished, and across the surface of the glass, in foggy script, was a sentence. 4 words, only one can remain. I stood there staring at it, barely breathing. And then, from the reflection in the lens, I saw him, standing at the far end of the room, not watching, not waiting, advancing, slow, deliberate, our eyes locked, and I knew. One of us had to go. He stepped forward, I stepped back. We circled each other like shadows in orbit, silent, mirrored. But I noticed something then. A hesitation. His steps were slightly behind mine again, only milliseconds, but enough. He was still learning, still becoming, and I was still the original. I had to act before he finished. Before he crossed the line I couldn't undo. He lunged first, faster than I expected. We slammed into each other at the base of the telescope column. Fists, elbows, nails, no strategy. Just two bodies fighting for one name. I don't remember most of it. Just flashes, blood on glass, breath in the cold, a hand around my throat, a face above mine, my face, twisted in some hideous blend of fury and hunger. I reached for anything, found the metal rod by the ladder well, swung, once, twice, a sickening crunch, the sound of someone gasping through broken teeth. He collapsed, shaking. No scream, just twitching. I stood over him, panting, watching his body melt, not bleed, not ooze, melt. Like the waxy collapse of a failing projection, his skin lost texture. His face blurred, softening into an echo of itself. He opened one eye, spoke in my voice, but his mouth wasn't in sync. "You are ready." Then his face split. Not open, apart, like pages tearing from a book, and from inside I saw. I don't know how to write it. Not yet. When I came to, I was lying beside the telescope. The body was gone. The floor was clean. Only one chair remained in the room now. I sat in it. The console lit up. A prompt blinked. Identity confirmed. Integration complete. And beneath it, "You may now proceed." I don't remember typing anything. But the dome began to rotate. The sky outside shifted. The stars moved faster than they should have. And somewhere inside my skull, I heard the red star whisper again, "You're one of us now. You always were." And I believed it. After that night, nothing returned to normal. I don't mean things were different. I mean the concept of normal stopped functioning. It was as though the rules that govern time and logic and selfhood had been quietly dismissed, like the universe had moved on to a new version of the software and forgotten to tell me. I started losing words, not forgetting them, losing them. I'd go to say something simple, door, coffee, cold, and the word would fall apart mid-thought. Just gone. Like someone had taken a black marker and scribbled over it inside my brain. Then came the memories, little ones at first. The name of my undergrad astronomy professor. The town where I was born. My mother's laugh, gone. Then larger things, whole conversations, whole days. I check my logs and see entries I didn't remember writing, referencing things I didn't remember experiencing. I couldn't tell whether I had written them or he had, or whether the difference mattered anymore. Once I tried to test myself. I asked the computer to list all logins associated with my ID. There were 2, same timestamp, same location, same credentials, overlapping. That was when I knew there had never been just one of me in this place. We had been sharing this body for days, maybe longer, taking turns, occupying the same shell like alternating shifts. I tried to keep track of who was in control by writing messages to myself, but I kept finding the responses in a different handwriting, sometimes neater, sometimes more confident. And once, when I asked, "Am I still me?" I found the reply written beneath it hours later, "You were never the one writing these." I began to doubt I'd ever existed. I mean that literally. There were moments, stretches of time, where I felt like a dream the real Jonathan Mercer had once had. A copy of a self, an echo trapped in tape hiss. My own voice began to sound wrong. I recorded myself reading passages from old research logs and played them back. Each time it was a little different. The inflection shifted, the rhythm altered, like someone was correcting the idea of me in real time. Even the photos of myself didn't match anymore. The scar on my eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at 13 had vanished. My eyes were just slightly darker, my handwriting curved at a new angle. One night I looked at my reflection and thought, "That's not my face. That's a version of the face I think I remember having, and worse, it looked better than the one I remembered. Sharper, more composed, less exhausted, a perfected revision of the mess I'd always been. I realized the observatory hadn't just been watching me. It had been editing me, curating, refining. There was only ever going to be one end to this. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. My body didn't care. It didn't weaken. It just kept going, as though I had become more image than flesh. The stars outside the dome changed, not visibly, not with telescopes, but when I stared at them long enough, hard enough, I began to understand what they were becoming. They weren't points of light anymore. They were eyes, billions of them, open, focused, watching this one observatory like it was the stage of some universal play. And we were the final act. I spent a full night in front of the mirror, just sitting, watching. My reflection did everything I did, until midnight. Then it smiled. I didn't. It leaned in slightly. I didn't. And when I stood up, it remained seated, calm, patient. I smashed the mirror again. But by then I knew better. He wasn't in the glass anymore. He was in the walls, in the fabric of the building, in every echo and every shadow. And in me. There was a moment, just before sunrise, where I felt myself pull apart, like I was standing a foot to the left of where my body thought it was. My thoughts blurred. I began to see my own limbs from the outside, but I couldn't scream, because there was no air, just a silence thick as wet clay. I collapsed. Woke up hours later to find a new entry scrawled in the center of the floor in salt. One word, except it wasn't written in English, but I knew what it said. I knew it in my blood. That was the last morning I wrote my name. From then on, I signed my logs with a single glyph, a spiral marked through the center with a line, a gate, one of 7. They've all turned now. I don't remember when the last one clicked into place, but I remember the sound. It was quiet, like the last breath before a sentence begins, and now I wait. For what, I don't know. There's no one left to ask. The observatory is empty. The logs show only one name now, mine. But I don't remember if that's me. I don't remember if I ever arrived here. I only know the rules, all 7 of them. I whisper them to myself each night, like a lullaby written in someone else's voice. And every time I reach rule number 4, if you see another version of yourself inside the observatory, do not engage. I pause, and I wonder, which one of us saw the other first? I hadn't touched the telescope in days. Not after the double, not after the red star, not after watching the moons peel apart and reassemble in the sky like bone fractures healing wrong. I didn't trust it anymore. It wasn't a machine to me now. It wasn't optics and wiring and bronze. It was something else, something alive. It had begun choosing what to show. It had memory. It had preferences. And worst of all, it had started showing me things before I looked. The rules came back to me that morning as I stood at the base of the telescope, hands trembling from the 3rd sleepless day in a row. If the telescope points itself somewhere on its own, let it. Do not correct it. Record only what it shows you. Do not describe it aloud. I thought I'd already followed that rule once, but that was just the first time it moved. Now, it wasn't moving. It was waiting. The console lights were off. No hum, just dead silence. I should have felt relief, but I didn't, because in the center of the telescope dome, just beneath the massive eye of the reflector, someone had drawn a symbol in dust, not with a finger, with precision. Geometric, intentional, 7 lines, 1 for each rule, circling a central spiral. The same glyph I had begun signing my logs with. the same shape that lived in my dreams. I stepped closer, and then the telescope moved, not gradually. It snapped 38 degrees east, sharp, sudden, almost violent. The dome lights flickered, the computers powered on. The motor whined with hunger. I stared at the screen, blank. Then, a single frame, nothingness, no stars, no galaxies, just dark. Then another. This one with movement? No, not movement, breathing. The dark was moving inward, slowly pulsing like a hole in space trying to close and failing. I watched it for 7 hours, didn't eat, didn't drink. My hands hovered above the controls the entire time, wanting to type but not knowing how to start. Every 30 seconds a new image would appear. I began to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't space, it wasn't a void, it was a womb, and something inside it was waking up. At first it looked like a ripple, like heat over pavement. Then it began to stretch, outward, upward, limbs forming without joints, skin without texture. It had no face, not yet, but I could feel its attention. And it recognized me. With every frame it grew sharper. It was learning, through the lens, through the feed. It was learning what to be, and it was choosing my shape. It built a mouth, then teeth, then eyes. The last image I saw before the feed cut out was me. Not a reflection, not the double, not an echo, but me, floating in blackness, smiling like something that had never needed to. Then the screen went black, the telescope powered down, the motor stopped, the dome sealed. When I stood up, my legs buckled. I stumbled to the exit and nearly collapsed against the wall. There was a note taped to the inside of the control room door, typed, clean, like all the others. But this one was different. It said, "Thank you. The image is clear now. It is ready to arrive. Do not describe it aloud. Names give it shape." I threw up in the stairwell. 3 times. It came out dark, too dark. I didn't look again. For 2 days I avoided the telescope dome. I sat in the break room with the lights off, clutching a notebook I refused to write in. But I kept seeing it anyway, in dreams, in reflection, in the shape of shadows under my door. The thing I'd seen in the telescope was no longer inside the telescope. It was behind my eyes, living there, waiting. And then it began whispering, not in words, in suggestions, a pressure behind my thoughts, an itch at the edge of my inner voice. And finally, on the 4th night, I picked up a pen and wrote a single phrase without knowing why. I can no longer tell which of us is watching. And then I turned the page and found this already written. We are. I knew what time it was before I looked at the clock. The air changed, pressure pulled downward, the vents went still. I didn't check my watch. I didn't need to. I felt it the way a dog senses thunder, the way a ship's hull knows when something massive is swimming below. It was 3:33 a.m., and the knock was coming. The observatory had gone dead silent. Not the kind of silence that lives in still air, but a pressurized silence, like being buried under ice. My ears popped 3 times in the dark. My nose started bleeding again. I was sitting on the floor of the corridor between the bunk room and the storage wing, knees pulled to my chest, back against the wall. And then it came. 3 knocks, from beneath, from the subfloor of the corridor. Not the break room this time, not the hatch that didn't exist. This time it was directly beneath me. I pressed my palms to the concrete. It was warm. A vibration moved through it, not constant, a slow heaving rhythm. Breath. I tried to stand but couldn't. My legs had forgotten how. I just sat there, hunched in the dark, as a voice rose from the floor. It didn't pretend this time. It didn't wear my mother's voice or Sarah's laugh. It didn't beg. It informed. You have been softened. I swallowed. You have been opened." My fingers twitched. My eyes burned. I tried to say something, anything, but my tongue was stone in my mouth. The voice was not loud. It was precise. "There is not much left, just the part that wonders what you are." Another knock. 2 beats this time, then 3. I pressed my ear to the floor. I didn't know why. The concrete was hot now, pulsing, like something behind it had a heartbeat the size of a planet. "I can give you one last thing," the voice said. "What?" I whispered before I could stop myself. Silence, and then, "Your origin." A pause. "And your purpose." I should have run, should have crawled away, should have screamed. But instead, I asked it, "Why me?" The voice from beneath answered instantly. "You were alone. That was it. You were alone." It wasn't an insult. It wasn't pity. It was a diagnosis, a fact. The knock came again, slow, hollow, 3 beats, then 4, then 7. The concrete cracked down the center, not visibly. I couldn't see the break, but I felt it, a long split down the hallway from one end to the other. And something began rising, not through it, into me. I don't know how to describe it. I could feel it moving through memory, like a gas filling the negative spaces in my thoughts, like heat warping the floor of my soul. I saw myself as a child, in a hospital room, watching machines breathe for someone I couldn't help. I saw myself in college, awake at 3 a.m., staring through a telescope, the sky so big I felt like it might swallow my name. I saw myself in bed with Sarah the night before she left, her back turned, her breathing so soft I thought she might disappear if I blinked. The thing in the floor showed me every moment I went unseen. And then it said, "You invited me." A wind rose in the corridor. From nowhere, from inside. Loose papers lifted, dust curled like vines across the ceiling. And beneath it all, the knock returned, faster now, hungry. I backed away, scooting against the far wall. The corridor ahead of me began to ripple, like heat waves, or water disturbed from below. A new sound joined the knock, not footsteps, hands, sliding against the underside of the floor, feeling for the seam. I wanted to scream, but instead I listened, because I realized the truth. This had never been a warning. None of the rules had. They were invitations. One by one, they had opened me, unpeeled me, made room for the thing in the floor, and now it was coming up to claim what was left. The final knock was different. It wasn't forceful. It was soft, knuckles brushing the floorboards like a goodbye, and then the voice returned. "You do not have to run anymore." The lights flickered once. The hallway turned black. I closed my eyes, and something touched my back, warm, human, familiar. It pressed its lips to my ear and whispered, "You were always meant to look." I woke up in the telescope dome. No memory of how I got there. The computer was on, the telescope was aligned, and the screen showed a reflection of the sky I had never seen before. The stars were gone, replaced by one great spiraling eye, rimmed in red, watching me like a god waiting for its disciple to speak. I didn't look away. I stared into it for hours, and eventually I began to smile, not because I was happy, but because I finally understood what it meant to be observed. There is no day anymore, only long stretches of dim violet light like sunset frozen at the edge of night. The clocks still tick, but their numbers mean nothing. Time no longer unfolds, it coils. I haven't left the telescope dome in what feels like days, but I haven't needed to. Everything I require is here: water, silence, and the sky. The eye still watches me, not always visible, not on the screen, not even in the glass, but in the reflex of thought. I feel it when I breathe, when I blink, When I try to recall my name and find only a low hum in its place, I understand now. The observatory was never a facility. It was a mouth, built to receive. It pulled in lonely men like a tide. Men whose minds had soft spots, weak spots, grief, regret, silence. The rules weren't for survival. They were instructions for resonance. 7 tones to tune a soul to its frequency. 7 petals opening a gate. 7 knocks on a door that only opens from the inside. I was the final variable, the last one to get it right. There were others. I see them sometimes in flickers of light, faces stretched too long, drifting between floors, humming to themselves, half-integrated, rejects. They got one of the rules wrong. They ran when they should have listened, spoke when they should have remained silent, looked away when they should have surrendered, and so they were discarded. But me, I followed them all, perfectly. Not because I was brave, not because I was strong, but because I was broken in just the right shape. The telescope no longer points outward, it points inward now, into me. I've stopped recording observations. There's no more data to log. What it shows me now is beyond entry. I see concepts, pre-human structures, the original designs, 1,000 civilizations folded into one breath, stars that eat their own light, thoughts that collapse the thinker, and always the spiral, turning, closer now. I don't sleep, I don't hunger, I only watch. And when I blink, I hear the whisper again. You were not meant to survive, you were meant to witness, you are the lens now. Sometimes I feel my bones humming, not shaking, not vibrating, humming, like chords, like something is playing me, tuning me. When I speak, I hear 2 voices, one in my throat, one in my mind, and I no longer know which is mine. I think the observatory's almost done with me. I think I'm almost calibrated, and then it will begin its final task, to open, not to the sky, not to heaven, but inward, to whatever has been speaking through starlight since before we knew how to look up. It's not hostile, it's not evil, it's something older than morality. It's what watches when gods die, and now it watches through me. I hope whoever finds this understands. The rules weren't warnings, they were devotions. 7 offerings to a thing that doesn't need names, just eyes and silence, and the patience to wait inside the dark. So if you're reading this, don't follow me. Don't finish the list, because once all 7 rules are followed, there is no one left to break them, only someone left to obey.